In this lesson, you're going to get to play around with music and After Effects and creating visuals that go along with the music. It's a little bit more complicated than the audio spectrum. I think you're going to like it. Let me show you what it's going to look like. So let me click here and hit spacebar to play. So you're creating these waves based on the amplitude of the audio. Let's get started. I'm going to go to File and New Project. Just start from scratch here so you can see how I'm doing it. Let's start by going to Composition and New Composition. Again, we're going to choose from the presets NTSC-DV and from the duration 5 seconds. This should be the default after you've done this a couple times. And don't worry about the background. Let's give it a name though. Let's call it audio waves. And then hit OK. And we do this just so that because we're practicing, we don't want our computer to have to overthink. And this will just make a nice slim file. All right, let's import that audio track that we've been working with. Control I, right click and import. We're working with track 4. Double click on that. I'm going to throw it down here on my timeline. So it's on my timeline down here, and now this time I actually want to create keyframes based on the amplitude or the loudness of the audio file. This time we're going to right click on the track. So that was a right click. Come up here to Keyframe Assistant and convert audio to keyframes. I'm going to select this layer and I'm going to hit U. You don't have to do this, but you can if you want. That opens up and shows you all the keyframes. Wow, look at all the different keyframes. And if I zoom in here on my timeline, there we go. You can see all the different keyframes in there. Wow, there's just a ton of them. And we're going to be using these keyframes in just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and hit U again to collapse that. We don't need that open at this point. We are going to need a solid to throw that effect on. So let's go to Layer, New, and Solid. Remember the keyboard shortcuts, Control Y. I'm going to call this Wave, just so that I'm labeling my layers, and I'm going to go ahead and leave all these defaults the same. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK here, and now I'm going to come over here to my effects and presets. In the search window, I'm going to type in wave. And there's radio waves, audio waveforms. We're going to choose the radio waves. So click and drag your radio waves over here onto the timeline. They're just going out in a repeating pattern. We want to tie it to the audio. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. We're going to actually create an expression, which is kind of an advanced thing in After Effects, but it's pretty easy. And if you follow along with me, you'll get it, no problem. You might have to rewind my tutorial a couple times in order to just nail this. Here's how we're going to do it. First, we're going to give ourselves some more room here on the timeline. If I put my cursor in between the comp window and the timeline here, my arrow becomes this double-headed arrow, and I'm going to just stretch it up all the way because I really don't need to see this right now. I need to work right here. So we're going to click on the wave layer, the solid layer, and we're going to twirl open this arrow and go to our effects. So we're twirling it open to effects. And there's the radio wave effect that we applied. Twirl that open, and we're going to get all the different things that are inside of that, and then we're going to twirl open wave motion, and this is where we needed to get to. We needed to get to the wave motion frequency, and we're going to also twirl open the audio amplitude. So I'm going to open that up and then open up effects, and now I'm ready to go. So in the effects for our audio amplitude, we have left channel, right channel, and both channels. I actually want to do this with both channels, and we can make our computer run a little bit faster by deleting the left channel. So click on left channel, press the delete key on your keyboard. Click on right channel, press the delete key, and that'll just simplify things here a little. Now let's twirl open both channels, and we're going to do a little work here. So we're going to tie the frequency of the waves, how often the waves come out, to the amplitude of the audio. So to do this, you're going to hold Alt down. So remember, that's the Alt key, or on a Mac, that's the Options key. So we're going to hold Alt down, and we're going to click right here on this little tiny stopwatch. go ahead and click on that, and it opens up this expression. And it kind of pre-starts to write these things down. And we've got a bunch of different little icons here. One looks like a little twirly. It's called the pick whip. And if you click on it, it lets you drag out this little line, and it lets you tie this expression to whatever you want. So I want to tie it all the way down here to my slider on the both channels effect of the audio amplitude. So I'm going to hold down the pick whip and drag it down here to the slider, let go, and you can see it writes this expression. I'm going to go ahead and twirl both of those layers up so that I get my room on my timeline. I'm going to stretch this down, and now we can play it. So you can see how my computer's having a hard time, and I have a fairly fast computer, so this might be kind of tricky for an older computer. Now we can play around with things like the color. So if we come over here to our stroke color, we can click on this and change it to something that has good contrast with the background. We can play around with the fade in time and the fade out time. Right now my fade out time is at 5 seconds, so I'm going to scrub that down a little. Start width, end width, that'd be kind of fun to play around with that. Maybe make the end width a little bit thicker and the start width a little bit thinner. Let's play around and take a look at that. So go ahead and experiment. That could, I think, drive me crazy if I had to look at that too much. But that's kind of a fun one. Play around with your effects, and remember, when you're done, you're going to need to export it for me so I can take a look at it. You do that by going to File, Export, Adobe Media Encoder, and it should remember the defaults, but we're using H.264, match high bitrate. I like to throw it in my export folder. So in my After Effects folder, I've made a folder called, let's see, where is my After Effects folder? There it is. It should be in your storage drive. I've made a folder called Export, and that's where I put my work. Go ahead and hit save, and then you have to hit the arrow play. And it shouldn't take too long depending on your computer. And then you're going to turn that in later.